Tēnā tātou. E tuake nei he mihi atu ki a tātou, tātou e whakakao nei tēnei ata, e ata wete wete, e ata wānanga i nā kōrero mo te Kaituna, ara te Maru o Kaituna no hoki. Mihi ana ki nā iwi, e tau mai nei, e pai nei i tēnei ata, utira nā kaunihira katoa hoki, tātou e nā kaunui ana ki tēnei kaupapa, ara te wai. Nō reira, he whakatūwhera i tō tātou hui kia karakia tātou. Tuia te rangi tōkuna te rangi te maunga rangi ki te whai au ki te ao mārama. Tau te tāmare pai ki raro, whakaeki hia whakaokoro, tūtara wiwini, tūtara wawana. Mā te tapu ihi, mā te tapu mana, mā whakarere atu ki te rangi awa tēnei te pau kātū. Te pau teina koe i tua, koe i waho, koe i tō puke puke tō maharahara. E tū hurunuku, e tū pākau rofa. He nuku ki runga, he nuku ki raro, he nuku hina atu, he nuku hina mai. He nuku whakaotu manawa e te toa, whakauaua rongo kia tēnā, whano, haramai te toki raka, haimi e, hui e, tā iki e. Nā tēnā tātou, he tauana. Good morning, members and staff. I welcome you to the meeting of Te Maru o Kaituna Authority Forum meeting. I remind you all that the meeting has been video recorded and the recording will be made available on the Bapeni Regional Council website following the meeting. Te mea tuatai, first thing, I'd like to introduce you to Charles Harley, and he's going to speak a little bit about himself. Kia ora, Charles.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm honoured and really humbled to be here. With Pim going away for 14 months, I'm filling in for Pim, and so being here is awesome because I've done some work before with the Rangataiki and the Hiwa Harbour Forum, and I think there's a really good opportunity for me to learn more about this forum and all the really awesome work which has been progressed through this forum and how that's been done, and hopefully I'll be able to take those learnings back and help with our other forums in the east, because I think both those forums, they're looking for a bit of a refresh, and so I've already been looking through your document and all of the good mahi you've done, and I'm looking for those learning opportunities. I've been with Toi Moana for 12 years and come through the land management side, and before that I worked for MPI for 12 years. So I've always been rurally based, and I love the small town feel of things. So coming to Tauranga is a bit of a change for me, but it's also awesome to be here and to share with all of the good work which is happening. So I'm, as I say, really excited to come here, and I'll do my best to support the chair and the great work which is happening within your rohi. Cheers, thank you.
Tēnā koe, Charles. Apologies. Any further apologies?
Noted that Steve Morris from TCC has put in apologies, is that correct?
Okay, we have apologies from Steve Morris, Andy Wickers, Lani Kiriopa, Nikki Douglas, Te Taru White, and Jane Nees. Okay, thank you. And Raponi Wilson. Thank you. Any further apologies?
Just from me, Jane. I'm here, but I am on Zoom, so my apologies. I can't be there in person. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you, Jane.
John Scrimger, Western Bay.
Right, can I have a mover for apologies, please? Kia ora. Second. Mm. Okay. We got it. Mover, Matu Moana.
So, sorry, Dean, yeah. So because Joelle is here and is counted as the Tapaweka rep, your vote, you don't have a vote today. I'm sorry, Dean.
Okay. So does that apply to Councillor Correct, because he's an alternate as well?
No, because Councillor Steve Morris has put his apologies in, so he is the alternate.
Thank you.
For that.
Okay, can we start that again? Can we have a mover, please? Kia ora, thank you. Rick. Seconder, Mate Moana. Thank you. And moving on, public forum. There's no public forum today. Items not on the agenda, there are none. Order of business. To my knowledge, there's no change to the order of business. Any declaration of conflicts? No. Okay, moving on to number 7, minutes to be confirmed. Are there any corrections that should be made to those minutes? Oh, got by. Can I have a mover, please, and seconder for the previous minutes? Kia ora, Maru. Second.
One second.
All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? Carried, thank you. Presentation. Okay, point number 8, presentations. Taheke 8C, proposed hydro project. Just want to introduce Mark Henry, Mitchell Dash, Tawhiri Morihu, representing Taheke 8C in the chair. Kia ora koutou.
Yes, Morena, Stephen Dash Aho. I hail from Ahuriri, Napier. I'm the principal of the company Mitchell Dash Limited, and we're going to lead this presentation, but I think we'll do some introductions first, starting with Araha, I think. Araha.
Morena, ko Aroha Campbell Aho. I am a trustee on Taheke 8C. Apologies from our chair, Tawhiri Morihu. He's a bit under the weather, so we decided that he should stay home for health reasons. And I'm looking forward to the presentation in the kōrero today. Kia ora.
Tēnā koutou, ko whakapuna ki te maunga, ko mohaka te awa, ko tāki tumu te waka, ko he tamaiti o Ngāti Kahungunu, rongo mai wahine whakatohea o ku iwi, ko Loretta Lovell tōku ingoa. Kia ora koutou, my name is Loretta Lovell. I am the legal advisor for Taheke 8C, and looking forward to having this conversation about the Taheke Hydro project. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora koutou, Mark Henry with Mitchell Dash, working alongside Stephen. So looking forward to presentation and I guess the kōrero. So kia ora.
All right, so let's get straight into it. We've got a short presentation, only 4 slides, I think, just to introduce the project. And this is the first formal presentation of this project to anyone. I think it's very, very important, and the timing of this meeting is just perfect for us because having the Te Maru Kaituna Authority together to really present this to you first is very special for us, and we certainly very much welcome the opportunity to give you a heads up. So maybe if we can go to the next slide. Oh, the clicker. Not very good on tech, so if this starts going backwards. Okay, so hydro project on the Tahiki land on the Kaituna River is not a new idea. It was first looked at by Bay of Plenty Energy Limited, and then a company called Nova over the last sort of 20 years or so. So we've been assisting Tahiki 8C as a company recently to finalise geothermal project consents, and those have been granted last week for a 38 megawatt geothermal plant. And the proprietors of Tahiki have a working plan to develop their land as a green energy hub. So geothermal first, that's all consented and able to proceed. And we've been working closely with Bay of Plenty Regional Council on that. Second project for the proprietors is to take the hydro scheme forward themselves, a scheme that's been looked at previously by public agencies or private agencies and power companies and things. And we've been working on this for the last few months, and reasonably well advanced on the proof of concept. So just to orientate yourselves, O'Kerry Falls up the bottom of the screen, so we're heading towards the sea at the top. The scheme involves a canal scheme where water is diverted onto Tahiki 8C land in about a 3 kilometre stretch, and then that water is used for renewable energy production through a hydro scheme, and it's returned back in its current form or the same form to the river 3 kilometres downstream. So it's a very common type of hydro scheme where just in terms of the fall of the river here, it's about 100 metres of head. So when you make hydroelectrical energy, it's driven by the head from where you start to the bottom. And so this is a very it's quite a unique part of the river where we can generate a significant amount of renewable energy for the district and the region with this canal diversion around a reasonably short part of the river. We are looking at scheme option A and option B, so probably at the moment we're looking at the option B, but we're working with engineers on that. So that gives you the geography of where we're at. Yes.
Just to better orientate me, so the circle there, O'Kerry Falls, is that the indicating pointing to where the intersection is that right? Or the where it breaks? No.
So Mark, can you just do the...
Look, it's a good question in terms of orientating ourselves here, because this is an idealised kind of drawing, obviously. So yeah, Lake Korotuiti to the south, or the bottom of the page, the coast to the north. So the falls are off the bottom of the page where the rafters go over. So this is below where the rafting operations are. And there is a pool called the Trout Pool, if anyone knows that locally. And it is at the end of the trout pool that we would look to build a structure in the waterway to divert the water onto Tahiki land. The little circle there is intended to show what the dam would look like in terms of providing obviously a minimum flow over that structure for purposes of fish passage, etc. So,
Mark, I'm wondering if we do have a contextual drawing. I'm wondering whether there's any way you could cut that out and send it through to the secretary, and then we can come back with the orientation, because I think that looks at the whole river and gives you the context of exactly where we are.
I live at Alkiri, so it's approximately, the river itself is, I think, 1.8 k that the commercial rip guys do, and it's just below that, so it'd be like 2 kilometres below Lake Rotiti. Yeah, yeah.
So in terms of the recreational use, apart from kayaking, which is happening in that, what they call the Gnarly Gorge, which is like a grade 5 plus, there's been quite a few deaths over the years with kayakers. It's very dangerous. The proprietors of Tahiki are just not happy culturally with that reach being used. So one of the key consultation processes we're going to be working through is this recreational use, and those very competent high-level kayakers do use this area, but that opportunity is the key issue that will be lost in terms of the scheme. But if the scheme proceeds, the river through that Gnarly Gorge opens up a whole bunch of other more available recreation for people, bouldering down there, and it's an incredibly sort of remote, beautiful part of the river. So as any resource consent processes, there's effects, but we're working very carefully through all those at the moment. So let's carry on, and I'll carry on because I've got the okay. So about 4 months ago, we have put together a specialist consulting team to prepare an AE, or an assessment of environmental effects, for resource consent applications. These are the 9 areas that we're using, and we have, in terms of Mitchell Dash, I've been working in this game for a long time, so we've put together a very strong team, and they're working through the effects assessments now, and in the next month or 2 we'll have that material available for some further consultation. And we're certainly looking at a lot of open, transparent consultation, while we finalise this. So those are the areas that we're studying. So one of the things that, with a project like this, because the effects, we're changing a natural environment. Under the RMA, we need to look at all the effects, and if we can't avoid some effects, we need to be in the process of remedy, mitigation, offsetting. So we've got a team together, both ecological and mahinga kai experts, looking at 2 potential enhancement projects. The first is what we call the Island Project. So I'll just take you back to the image. You'll see with this canal scheme, we're creating an island that's currently mainly just forestry and pretty scruffy, not scruffy land, but farmland, forestry, and the idea, because of the ability for like predator control in this island to be available, with sort of water barriers and things, the concept with this was we'd replant that whole island into a native vegetation and really curate it very carefully as what I think, because I'm involved in a lot of these sort of projects around the country, and a pretty amazing local resource for that area. The second area that we're doing a lot of work on, and we're working with an advisor, Cameron Ormsby, looking at mahinga kai projects, which really focus around opportunities for kura tuna around the canal storage, and even Cameron's looking at some of the traditional ways of harvesting and things. But we're also really aware of the great work your committee's doing and the projects sort of down the river, and very interested as a talking point to talk about how taiki is part of the Kaituna awa owners and kaitiaki to work with the trust here, perhaps on supporting some of your existing projects, or thinking about the whole river in terms of opportunities for enhancement. So I think that's perhaps, last slide, next steps. We've got a program of consultation with iwi directly, local and regional authorities. We're working to roll through. We are finalising the design options, and we'll have that finalised next week. And then our consents and applications are being put together, and we'd love to be able to use this forum as a sounding board as we go through, because with the iwi mana whenua representatives, the council involved here, it's, in my mind anyway, it's like an ideal partner to be working with as we develop the whole project. So that's pretty much where we're at, and certainly very happy to take questions. And I'm not sure whether Mark's managed to get through that context plan to the secretary yet, but when it comes through, just give us a thumbs up and I'll go to that. And in the meantime, happy to take any questions.
Questions and comments?
Yeah, how much work are you putting into that? I see you got a quadruple bottom line plan there, recreational, which is a social, and some discussion with iwi. And so that's your cultural input into it. And I think that we know where the economic benefits come, but you have to look after, if you like, those social capitals first to ensure that the eels are running on the pathway that they ran for over 1,000 years. Because if they're blocked, you'll see the disappearance of the eels. Like if you build a dam, they go up the river in certain times in line with the moons and tides, and they come back out. So there's a customary, which really says that the Māori gods need to be taken into account. You know, Homai Tiki Tiki Tawhiri Mate and those. So the quadruple bottom line is that I would like to see a lot more input into it. And I just want to remind you also that the Maru of Kaituna is an act of decree. So it's ideal to work through the Maru of Kaituna, because politicians can't just chop and change things without going through an act of decree. And the act of decree, of course, is the Kaituna River. And you can get all those claimant groups, Ngāti Pikeo and the rest of them, who's got acts of decrees to support you, then you can turn a blind eye on politicians who come and go every 5 years. That's the political pitch. Yeah, so in general, I'd like to see a wee bit more of your quadruple bottom line, your particularly your riparian and all that. riparian protection.
Absolutely. And we're looking at all of those. I suppose the Awa itself has got deep cultural connections with many people, and in looking at how we look at this project to bring the renewable energy online, really absolutely putting it at the forefront. I love the way you talk about the quadruple bottom line, and you know, in the old days, you just get an ecologist to come along and work on the science. We've really embedded Mahinga Kai expertise as our sort of our key guiding force for some of those environmental river cultural issues. So yeah, certainly Loretta can back me up there or give a view.
Hilda, yeah, so it's probably just stepping back and taking your point. Tahike, when they started this process, much as they did with any process on their whenua, they took the view that they weren't looking at projects in a way that is the norm. They looked at it from a, how does this reflect, their perspective of acting appropriately with reflecting the awa, the mauri of the awa as it currently is, and how they can improve things as well. So the conversation about including experts and including people who are going to look at things differently was really important, and it was something that they set with their experts from the start. So this wasn't we'll bring a Mahinga Kai expert in later on because we think there's a problem. No, we brought the Mahinga Kai person in from the beginning because we knew that we wanted a project that was designed and aligned to reflect better outcomes. So, you absolutely take your point about the triple bottom line. That has been a foundation of how can we do this better. It would be very easy for us to look at designs that don't think about those things, but no, we absolutely are thinking about those things, and they are foundational to the design, not an add-on to the design, as you often see with some of these projects. So yes, Tahike is very mindful of that, and that has been at the forefront of the work that they have done and are doing in terms of ensuring that the design reflects the best outcome. So as Stephen says, conversations about riparian, about wetlands, about the island and how we can create something that is, special for, they say flora and fauna, I'll say, the bats, the native species that are adversely affected by the lack of pest control. So how can we build in pest management and all of those things to ensure that what we're thinking about and what we're contemplating is actually possible and effective, so that when we come and have a conversation with iwi, we're not blowing smoke, as it were. We're looking at it from what can we meaningfully do with this design and how can we make it better.
As a metaphorical comment, I would say that you had a riparian plan that grew meadow trees along the banks of the streams. The meadow trees would protect the carbons from going and pathogens from going into the creek, and the kerirus will become a pest. And we won't have to rely on Kentucky Fried Chicken. That's the long-term plan.
But certainly, use the example of the tuna, etc. That's also another conversation we are having about what is actually happening at that end of the hour. Is that what are the species there? What can we do to improve and bring back in many ways what has been lost up at our end of the hour? And so that is work in progress, and as I said, Cameron, who's a whanaunga of mine, not the Ormsby side, the Rongamai Wahine side, is very actively thinking about, well, how can we do this, and how can we create not only a better outcome, but how can we do it and and teach the rangatahi some of the traditional ways of doing things. And he gets very involved, and I start getting photos of him, putting things together with reeds and all sorts of things. So he's very passionate about how we can do this properly and what we can build on from a social perspective, but from a rangatahi perspective and from a cultural perspective in terms of bringing back and building on some of the traditional aspects of our history. So it's very exciting and very interesting in terms of having them at the forefront, not as an add-on.
What a letter through you, Joel. Cameron, we need to get Cameron in front of this group. He's been working with his daughters in St Joseph's School, looking at some of the traditional harvesting techniques and actually building them and trialling them and catching kora and eel. And he'd love to be able to bring in the canals and things, give us this right sort of waterways to do that. But I know we're probably running out of time. Other questions before we go there? I'll just do this orientation. This is the key plan which we're talking about. So I think it's that red block area where the project area is downstream of Akiri Falls. And if we home in, the white line is the Tahiki HC land block, and the project's fully within their land, which from a landowner consenting point of view provides quite a unique opportunity for Tahiki HC to really not as I said before, not be involved as a passive landowner as traditionally would have happened, but to actually really own and design and have this project as an iwi hydro generating plant that I've worked with people like Rotakawa, Turapaki Trust that own their own generating plant, and it's just a game changer from a social perspective too. Like, I think that is massively important. So any other questions either in relation to the context or anything else? Very, very happy to answer them.
Chair, one just I think grade wise from where you're putting on, that's grade 3 from there down to where it looks like you're going to finish the project, and then so there was recreationally it was known as Awesome, and they used to run a commercial operation with iwi in there, and it would put on at Trout Pool and go down for about 3 kilometers, and then they'd get out, and then from that point where you got out was known as Awesome below that. So that was obviously only through the graces of working with iwi, and they opened that up. But as I understand, I've actually personally done it, so I've been down in a raft, and it's grade 3, grade 4. There's one little waterfall on it, grade 4, and I haven't done Awesome Gorge, wouldn't go near it. And that was when iwi were working with an operator at that. I'm talking 10, 15 years ago. So, yeah.
Just for the geography, to be clear,
Yep.
the area from where the rafters get out,
Yep.
down to where this offtake weir is, that is Awesome Gorge. No, that's not. Yeah, that is Awesome Gorge. So the top part is Awesome. That's grade 3.
Yep. No. Sorry.
No,
Sorry.
well, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong.
If it starts at Trout Pool down,
that's Awesome.
So that was actually a commercial run, grade 3 and grade 4.
Yes.
And so we can't run. You wouldn't be able to run Awesome as a commercial operation.
That's right.
So it was grade 3 and 4.
Yes, that's right.
Yep. Cool.
And Gnarly is this one here.
Yep.
Through that area. So it's Gnarly downstream of where the canal offtake is.
Okay.
It's Awesome upstream, and that's
cool.
just
Thank
geography.
You. Yep. And if you need help engaging with the recreational rafting, that's my kind of background. So kayakers and rafters, choice. That's awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you. That's amazing. We've got someone that's really in touch with what we're talking about here in terms of the current activities. But so, Stephen, we've heard regarding the environmental, cultural sort of aspects. which, come at a cost or maybe not, because there are some benefits there, But looking at the sort of the scale of the project and looking at the beneficiaries, economic, etc., and the consumers of the generation, so those as the beneficiaries, financial and consumers, how many people are we talking about here?
So in terms of the beneficiaries of Tahiti HC or just the wider regional context?
The direct beneficiaries, financial beneficiaries, and also the consumer who will consume the energy beneficiaries, just within that sort of scope. What are we talking about?
Tahiti HC has about 1,300 shareholders. So there's that. In terms of the wider context, well, I think last I read, Rotorua has about 80% of its electricity generation imported, Tauranga possibly the same. So when you think about for Tahiti, and if you look at that bottom map there, Tahiti has transpower lines running through it, so the national grid. They also have Unison and Powerco lines running through it as well. So there is an absolute conversation about, is the power going to the national grid and more broadly, or is there an opportunity actually for power to be going to the local lines and supporting some of the work that's happening or the region is doing in terms of, enabling electricity and energy security for the region. So there is an absolute conversation about what this could look like. And this is both the geothermal and the hydro, if you think about them as the foundation of the 2 renewable projects that we are promoting on Tahiti. You think about that opportunity for electricity security in the region, and it just happens to be, for the grace of, that we have those 2 opportunities. So when you think about projects in the round, often the issue is, well, can you get transmission? Can you get access to it? We have the opportunity with both. And the geothermal, now that it's consented, actually provides for a new substation. So we can either connect to Transpower or we can connect to the other one. But either way, both of them provide that economic benefit, that wider economic benefit of electricity security, in addition to the more standardised employment opportunities and, the wider commercial opportunities that come with any project of this size where, there are the obvious wider need for housing, people to be there, and all the catering, security, all the things that come with projects of this size will come from an economic perspective for the region and quite locally in that context. So we're, again, as part of our expert team, we have economists who are far brighter and know far more than I, talking and working through all the options that could come from this project. But we know from the geothermal and consenting that there are obvious and clear synergies between the 2.
Could I follow up with that? I think Tahiti is absolutely blessed with the transmission connections that are on their land, both national grid and also local. It's actually, if you're looking for an ideal renewable energy site for both geothermal and this hydro scheme, it's just incredible. A lot of the effects for other renewable energy projects, wind farms, others that I've worked on in many years, the big drama is how do we get transmission, which quite often has more effects than the scheme itself. So it's a blessed location in terms of access to the grid and the local network.
Can I also say the other thing to think about with both of these projects is that they both create baseload generation. So they're not subject to the rain, the sun, the wind. They create baseload generation, and as contemplated here, this project would be because of the storage, would be contemplating baseload peaking generation as well. So again, it's just that idealness of creating a mechanism where, when you think about more broadly what our nation needs, we can say the amount of solar and all of those sort of things, but if the sun's not shining, solar isn't working. So anything that actually starts to promote baseload generation has to be a good thing. Baseload in a region that needs it, even more so.
Scale of this seems, the chair, if we can have a supplementary question. The scale is obviously bigger than I had in mind here. So comparing it, say, to Ruahihi, if you're familiar with that, are we talking about something of that scale, or sort of in terms of delivering energy, in terms of a sub area residential that can provide? What are we talking about here?
It's always a good question, isn't it? Try and bring that home to what does it mean for homes and things. So we're still working with, I think as Stephen shared, we're still looking at final designs of things. Included in that is understanding what generation would be. But because there is some opportunity to, in a limited sense, provide some storage on the scheme, so you can have some peak or load following kind of provision. That's a bit technical, but to try and answer your question, the install capacity would be in the order of 100 to 250,000 homes, sort of average homes. You usually talk about, in terms of megawatts, 1 megawatt is about 1,000 homes, if you hear people talk about install capacity, and that's a very averaged figure. So this is potentially something, so this is just the hydro, and Stephen's whispering, of course, then there's the geothermal. So from a Tahiki HC wider perspective, you add that to that as well. So, yeah. Thank you.
I just make a comment on we're talking about the economic capital now. And as benefactors, we actually need our capital protected, because you get to a certain point where go by nights alters the legislation, and that happens. You get politicians only they come into power for about 3 or 4 years, then they put into place a legislation that's hard to shift, and it actually marginalizes the benefactors. So what I'm talking about is that Taheke is important, not only to the regional economy, but to the national economy. Reason why that it could be more valuable is because of the Port of Tauranga. Port of Tauranga is the gateway to the world. That's where all the trade goes. All the logs and all those sort of things that come from the central North Island goes along the Eastern Arterial, so that's the road to Rome. And so there are utilities that are required to add value to the capital. And this needs to be told in broad outright, and to ensure that foreign investors don't invade, because there's opportunity since Roger Douglas for them to come and invade. You build the utility up, build the capital up, and suddenly it's been taken away by some foreign investors who comes into play. So all that actually needs to be considered in your capital economy, put it that way.
I will make the observation, and I agree completely, that having engaged with your varying entities, your gentailers and things like that, one of the things that's always front of mind is, you can have a partner, they can be good or they can be bad, they can leave, Tahiki can't. Tahiki can't leave its land, Tahiki will not leave its land, so therefore we better do the work up front to make sure that we get the right people engaging with us. That's been a hard process. It is a very hard process to get it right, and that's not lost on Tahiki, as you'll appreciate. So yeah, it's not lost on Tahiki that, Tahiki can't leave, and they won't leave, but nor will they accept a situation where they are marginalised on their own land as well. So when we talk about Tahiki's aspirations and Tahiki's approach to how a project will be operationalised on their land, when I say, we bring the experts that we want in, it's not intended to be facetious. It's intended to say, this is the way Tahiki is going to do this. And it is reflecting that, because they can't leave. It is their whenua, they've got to protect it. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. And, Tahiki has, for many years, you know, you can talk to the councils, has actively engaged to protect their position and actively engaged to make sure that whether it's in the regional plan, the district plan or whatever, that they've had a voice in terms of what their aspirations are and things like that. This is just in many ways a culmination of all that work and all those committees and all those kaumātua who had a vision many years ago about what this land could do.
Kia ora, Councillor McDonald.
Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi kia koutou ki te harapai ki te tautoko tō mahi. First of all, you know, I want to applaud the project for multiple reasons. One of them, I guess the role of this committee is the protection of the Kaituna. And I guess during the duration of the project and what would, you know, be most important to us is the implications for the Kaituna. But, you know, I sit here looking at you as uri o the Kaituna, and I know you would look after the awa anyway. So ngā mihi kia koutou. The other thing I want to acknowledge you for is the quadruple bottom line that you're taking. With this new government, we're already seeing that being impacted on, and that they're looking to do away with the quadruple bottom line. But I guess the saving grace for all of us is that our people will continue to acknowledge the quadruple bottom. And to me, I guess that gives me a sense of comfort that while councils may follow the directives of central government, the tangata whenua will continue to apply the quadruple bottom line to whatever we do. So ngā mihi kia koutou. The other thing I want to express is the whole cultural content of the project too, which is another area that may be diluted within the process and policies of council. So I applaud you for continuing that in the project that you're doing. And I know that tangata whenua will continue to make that a strong footing on whatever they do. So, you know, it really is up to tangata whenua to maintain that line, although we're getting these directives from central government, which I seem to see in some councils are starting to want to follow that directive as well. So ngā mihi kia koutou, you know, keep going, and I'd love to continue seeing that, not just in this co-governance entity, but all co-governance entities across the region. So, you know, I do applaud you for the project. I want to wish you luck. It's inspirational to see tangata whenua with these types of projects and starting to I guess increase the whole Māori economy, because, you know, we do have the whenua, and I acknowledge the struggle in getting support of our own whānau, getting financial support, getting central government buy-in, getting local government buy-in, but you come this far, it's looking good, and I'd love to see you continuing to come here to keep us abreast of what the progress is doing, and for us to monitor whether or not, you know, there are impacts for the awa and how we both address that. Nō reira, ngā mihi.
Tēnā koe. Mihi ana koe kia koutou, nā māngai o tāheke HC, me nā kōrero ko whakawhariki hia i tēnei wā. Paku kōrero.
Kei te ranga tira tēnā koe. O tira nāra ngā paupau ki ngā rangitu hā i whakatū tēnā koe. O tira kia waka koe ki kia ora. I'm really keen on renewable energy initiatives. I'm going to sound maybe a bit goofy here, but this is not Western Bay staff talking so much as being a voice for my awa Kaituna. Kia ora, moko era te amo. Staff member from Western Bay, but grew up without, all around the Kaituna, within Te Puke, Te Puika Waitaha, Te Haurangi, Te Aroa Whānui. Kia ora. For me, just a bit of context. In In terms of the awa, we have wastewater discharge from the whole Rotorua Lakes area going into the Kaituna, eventuating into the Kaituna. The very lower reaches of the Kaituna for industry, farming particularly. The lower reaches of the Kaituna was really prone to flooding, which is actually really good for the environment, for the awa, for the whenua. It was the meandering of the awa was straightened. We had a cut, what do you call it? Output into the ocean, straightened, and the effects of the cleanliness and the liveliness and the mauri and the wairu of the lower reaches of the awa was greatly impacted, including the shellfish and everything within ecology, within the awa. We've got AFCO discharge and water take. We've got an enormous amount of farm operations lining our awa. And for the sake of economy and stuff, our awa has already been, I don't know the right word, but played with for the lower reaches. And then years later, we've had to try and come and fix it. Actually, the regional council here has kind of fixed with the rediversion and all of that kind of thing. So should this project kind of, get wheels off the ground, I want to be really, really sure we don't have to come back later to do that fix up, what regional council has been doing in the last few years. But then also, again, I'm really keen on renewable energy, green energy, but at the cost of cutting into our awa. I just, also want to ensure there has been great consideration to the effects of the lower reaches of the awa, because our awa has been kind of played with really, both ends and basically all along as well, mostly for the sake of economy, for the sake of industry, where the mauri of our awa that we feed off and it feeds off us has been impacted. And just I'm talking personally myself, as well as my ancestors, have pa all along the awa. We undertake, we talk about the quadruple bottom line, but to add to that, it's probably incorporated with the cultural side of it, but there's a spiritual side of it as well. And personally myself, I've undertaken many ceremonies within the awa. So as a voice of our awa, I just want to make sure there's just the most upper consideration for all aspects. And I know you've been doing it, and including, iwi input right from the outset, but I guess, the only thing I want to express is that, let's not make no mistakes. And then years later, we have to kind of fix and that kind of thing. I haven't really voiced it really well, but sorry. Kia ora.
Yeah, and look, we get it. I mean, I think I will make the observation that, and it comes back to that, we can't go anywhere. We'll always be here, taheke. So if we get it wrong, I always jokingly say for me, as a Māori lawyer, my litmus test is not Law Society rules. Is if somebody comes up to my moko in 50 years' times and says, what your nanny did, and it's a bit like that for taheke. We have to do this properly and we have to get it right, because we can't go anywhere if it goes wrong. We will be answerable to that in the future. So that's not lost on us, and it's also part of why at the forefront you see two options there, not one only, because the one only is the best economic. We're looking at this, we put an option forward and we get all our experts in to look at it and say, well, what are the impacts? What are the full impacts? And that includes hydrology, but also what are the benefits? Can we use, because we're very mindful at our end that, when the gates are opened and the paru goes through, that someone's got to flush that through. So is there a way by, you know, doing this that we can help flush the paru? Are there opportunities here that we can look at in a context of doing this with the right design? And I think when I look at it as, you know, we've got this option A, we've now got option B. We'll possibly get to, sorry, Stephen, option B, so, you know, there'll be another option possibly, but it'll be because we've gone through all of that with all of our experts, including our cultural, including our people, to say what is the right outcome and what are the effects and how do we manage this? And that is for the whole awa, because we are not lost on us that the awa is a whole. And I think because we come at it that way, we're not locked into some of the normal paradigms, which is, this is our little area, we don't care what's happening over here or anything like that. That is the opposite. So we absolutely hear you. And aheke, that is why we've taken the approach we have. But Pai, absolutely, these are conversations we are having as well.
Good, just briefly, please.
Yes, thank you. And look, in tautoko, I think that is, thank you for coming forward with your awa hat on, and also, look, perhaps the plea for me, like this is a perfect forum for us to really feedback and be involved with as final designs are taken, as offset projects are developed, and probably a plea for me, and I know I see Ella online and the district councils, it would be awesome if we could keep the connections alive through this forum with the councils and the iwi, because instead of us going off and having individual presentations and sort of dividing everything up into little, you know, we've got to do the regional council because we've got to do resource consents through there. We've got to meet with the district councils. I just would really put that plea forward that for us, the forum that you have already is just our ideal sounding board and ideal for guiding us as we make all those final decisions. So that's the final thing for me. Thank you very much.
Last question.
Kia ora koutou, Grant Daly, Makatutapuki Ward Councillor. Just 3 quick questions. I understand there's an old historical power site just below O'Kerry Falls, off to the left. I think I seem to recall visiting it once. Just wondering if you guys, as part of this project, had looked at that for its historical context and any maybe historical effects or implications, maybe just to add it to the whole project overview, I guess. But the other question, is this a project on the scope of the Regional Infrastructure Fund? And thirdly, Aroha, as a trustee, is your trust 100% on board with this project?
Oh, sorry. Yes, certainly we are. The trust looked at, dialed back from a strategic perspective and looking rather than just specifically at geothermal. And then we says, how can we, because Taheke HC has been around for 70 years and we've done farming, we've done forestry, all of those sorts of things. And whilst the hydro was actually on the table, they actually put it aside and went for the geothermal. Then we did a rethink, and then we thought about the awa, the whenua, and certainly our whānau, and looked at the resources that we do have. And that's how we came up with the concept of a green energy hub. So the green energy hub includes the geothermal, hydro, and biomass. So biomass is actually, it's on the table, but in order to do that, we need to have the other 2 that are generating. And so last year we put it up to our owners as well in terms of the Green Energy Hub. They were fully supportive of that. And so that's the work that from a planning perspective, that the committee has supported and put a management team together to actually make this happen. And so, yes, definitely, in regards to supporting it fully.
Through the chair. I think it's a fantastic presentation that you've given. For this entity here, it has representation, as you mentioned, along the entire length of the river, including the Pumautanga and Ngāti Piki o Ngāti Henekura, and connecting with the Pakekesi HC. Mihi mai ana ki a koe Tāwhiri, say hello to him. It's sad to hear that he is unwell this time, but yeah. So I just wanted to, the purpose of this forum is the restoration, protection and enhancement of the environmental, cultural, spiritual health and well-being of the geographical area, being the Kaituna catchment and all tributaries running into it. So that's what we do. And so, Stephen, as you've alluded to, I don't know if this is the one and only group. We're certainly not a one-stop shop. So consultation with various iwi along the river needs to happen. But I think as a sounding board, this is a great committee to be able to walk through and share the vision. And so I'm always, I suppose, looking at when there's something that benefits the surrounding areas of the river, how do those benefits reflect in the river? So I'll leave that with you to think about. I don't think I need to express what that might mean, but kia ora koutou.
Hi, and I think noting we haven't got a lot of time, but you know we'll leave our contacts and we'll be more than happy to have ongoing conversations. And we welcome if there is somebody at an operational end that we could be talking to before your next meeting, so you know we can be keeping on this conversation and almost have a standing agenda point at the next hui where we can come back and say this is what we've been doing and this is the conversation we've been having with your operational team. That would be great. Just in response to your other questions in terms of the RIF, yes, we are talking to them. It's like anything in Wellington at the moment, you feel like you're 10 steps forwards and 20 steps back, but we are having those conversations with the MB and ministers and things like that about how they could support this project, given the timescale in terms of all the work you've got to do just to get to resource consent can be considerable in terms of, don't listen, Aroha, how much it costs for us consultants every month to get these things moving forward. So yes, we are having that conversation. On the old historical power site, I'll be honest, I didn't know anything about it. So I'm absolutely, I can absolutely say we will be going and have a look at it. One observation I will make, and we should have possibly said this, is that this system is called a run-of-river hydro scheme. One of the reasons we liked the idea of it was that it is something that has been utilised by Indigenous peoples elsewhere, particularly internationally. The Canadian Indians and things like that have all promoted this form of scheme as something that is less environmentally onerous on their awa, and it's something that we took to mind in terms of, while this process started over the last 20 years, we've looked at it with fresh eyes and a new perspective in terms of how we can do this. But yes, we are going to go have a look at the site because I knew nothing about it and we're going to find it. So kia ora.
Kia ora tātou.
Our hydrologist knew about it, so it was something it was on my radar, but yeah.
It's a bit up the stream from where you're proposing, but I mean, it's not far away really.
Right, kia ora tātou, ko pai te wā kia tātou I tēnei wā. So thank you to the team from Taiki HC for your presentation. Kia ora koutou.
After hearing the presentation and thinking about this committee, I'm unsure of the scope and authority this committee has, but potentially would this committee like to perhaps put a submission into any resource consent application or whatever, or does that fit with us? Is any desire? I'm just singling that in terms of, just keeping
Maybe through the chair, maybe we just wait for some of the other updates before we make a submission.
I'm just saying that have we got the ability to make a submission? Is there, or, you know, firstly, is there desire, but have we got an ability to do that as a committee?
Please, Joe.
Kia ora, ko Joe Watts tōku ingoa. I've been working with Te Maru on their river document for a number of years now, and I can answer your question about your mandate, and definitely. So some of your functions are, as Mr. Flavel said, about restoring and protecting the awa, but also very broad powers under the Tapaweka Settlement Act, which allow you to give very firm direction to the regional council and district councils on matters of protection of the awa, including making submissions. So definitely on your kaupapa, we're under former Chairman Flavel's leadership, we've made a number of submissions on behalf of Te Maru on positive and negative types of submissions. So the zip line was one that Te Maru put some very positive feedback and submissions at various processes, various parts of the process as they become formal. So yeah.
Okay, carrying on. 8.2, fast track consenting legislation update presented by Ella Tennant, Consents Manager. Kia ora, Ella, are you there?
Kia ora, I am. Kei whakatāne, taku kainga nānei, no tauranga moana ahau. He mangai no toi moana, ko hau te Consents Manager, ko Ella Tennant taku ingoa. So I was going to just provide you with quite a brief update on the Fast Track Approvals Bill legislation. And I apologise I'm not there in person, at home because I have COVID. And I will say that we are expecting the legislation to come into law before your next meeting. So if you'd like me to come to the next meeting and present in a bit more full detail about that process once it's law, I'm happy to do so and sort of run through that fast track process in more detail if that's something the forum would like to hear about.
Yes, I'm getting a bunch of nods around the room, so yes, kia ora.
Okay, cool. So where we're at the moment in terms of the Fast Track Approvals Bill, I'll just give a really brief background on what it is. So we had a COVID Fast Track process for consents, and in fact the Tahiki hydro, the geothermal scheme, as you just heard, was consented under that just last week, I think. And we've had a few around the region consented through that process. It's no longer available, even though there's a couple that are still running their course. And there is another fast track process that the previous government brought in. Don't have any of those applications within our region, and we haven't had any. And then there's the Fast Track Approvals Bill, which this government has proposed. And so it's still going through that legislative process of becoming a law. It is quite similar to the other fast track processes, but it brings in the ability to get other approvals, so under other acts like the Conservation Act, the Wildlife Act, and even Heritage NZ, sort of archaeological authorities. It has certainly received a lot more opposition than the previous processes. It does go a lot further in terms of there's not as much environmental protection built in fact, very little at all. And, there's been quite a lot of concern about the project and the proposal, the fast track bill, with 27,000 submissions, the majority in opposition. But anyway, in brief, it proposes really tight timeframes generally for people to comment on it, unlike a resource consent process through a council process. If it's notified, then anyone can submit, such as the forum. For a fast track process, people are invited to comment, so it's never open to just anyone. It's quite selective in who can comment, and then there's a very short timeframes for those comments to be received, and at the end of the process, the usual appeal rights are not there. It's only on points of law, and so quite different to what we're all used to in terms of a regular consenting process. So as I said, the Select Committee report is out. It suggests some changes. The biggest change was actually announced by the government a while back, and that's that ministers wouldn't make the final decision on whether something is granted or not, and what conditions it would have, that those would actually be the expert panel. That's, I think, a good change. It's something that a lot of submissions were seeking to. So that's the biggest change. The rest are relatively minor changes. There's a little bit more time provided for comments on referrals. There's to be a report on treaty settlements for listed projects. In the bill, it was only referred projects that would have that report. The Minister for Infrastructure would decide whether something goes fast track or not decide whether it's granted or not, but whether it goes fast track. Originally, that was going to be 3 ministers. And the panel, the ability to decline an application by the panel has been widened a little bit. In the bill originally, it was very, very narrow grounds that something could be declined, and it was really just because there wasn't enough information, but they'd have to be asking for that information, so really didn't provide a lot of grounds for decline, and it certainly didn't provide for decline on environmental effects. That's now been added in a little bit so that they could decline it on the basis of environmental effects if they think that outweighs the purpose of the bill. And the purpose of the bill still doesn't have any environmental element to it. It is just to get projects running, basically get through a consent or get through approvals quickly. So it'll be quite interesting to see how that plays out in reality when it comes in. The listed projects have been released, which you probably have seen in the media. There's 12 in the Bay of Plenty. Within this area, we're looking at Balroge with 2,000 to 3,000 homes, 60 to 80 hectares of industrial land, and also the Tara Road proposal by Ngāpotiki, about 600 homes and a couple of hectares of commercial land. There are a number of projects that applied to be listed but did not get through. They could still go through a referral process once the bill becomes an act, so next year probably. It'll become an act this year, but they may apply next year for referral. And the Tahiki Hydro Scheme, which you've just heard about, was one of those. There's the Kaituna overflow, stormwater overflow. So the actual stormwater was granted and consented some years ago, but this is just the physical overflow construction. There's the Ford block, which I'm sure you're all quite familiar with in terms of a land development proposal. There's one at Rangiuru, which is a mixed-use housing and industrial in Papakainga. Papamau East, another 200 homes and a recreation centre. And I can provide a link to that report that goes through all of those projects. It doesn't provide much detail. We are hoping to receive more detail on all those applications, but haven't got that yet. So that was all I was going to go through. If there's any questions.
Kia ora, thanks, Ella. Any questions for Ella?
Yeah. There's a positive approach to fast tracking and there's a negative approach. There's a positive approach to fast tracking and there's a negative approach. And I would put it this way, that the negative part of it, it's a gravy train for spin doctoring lawyers and property developers. And because it allows them to get a resource consent through some forms of legal mitigation. And the positive part about it is to create a legislation that will get rid of all the bureaucracy and all those sort of things, because people want to build houses on their customary land as cheaply as possible. Yeah. So the question is, have you sorted out those particular issues? Compiled the positive side of a fast tracking and the negative side of it?
I'm not sure what you mean in terms of.
Well, that's why I tried to explain that the current situation is a resource consent through fast tracking. It's quite bureaucratic and quite bureaucratic in terms of its process.
Right.
Quite costly. Yeah, quite costly. And the positive part about it is to get rid of all that revenue collecting, if you like, speculators who makes a gravy train out of resource consenting, and simplify it.
Jane, would you like to respond to that?
You don't want me to?
If you can, Ella.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of what we've seen under the previous fast track process is that it cost ratepayers quite a bit in terms of our part in that process because it wasn't recoverable from the applicant. The process is generally actually still quite long if you're comparing it to a council process. So where it provides great benefit to the applicant is if there's likely to be an appeal and it's likely to go to the courts or to mediation, then they're saving a lot on lawyers' fees. It also saves us because we have a cost in defending any decision at Environment Court and further courts. But in terms of the actual council process, I think from what I hear anecdotally from some of the applicants that have been through the process, the council process is actually a bit simpler in some ways. And so, yeah, there's a bit of a weighing up there. Overall, if you're expecting an appeal, then absolutely fast track will be better for the applicant. If you're not expecting an appeal, then it's actually quite an expensive and drawn out process to go through. So, for instance, some that applied last year still aren't decided. And it's not a very, what's the word for it? My COVID brain kicking in. Council generally work with applicants quite a bit, and there's a bit of back and forth, and there's an open line of communication. With the fast track process, there's not, and so applicants and councils are sort of working in a vacuum. There's no discussions with the decision makers. It's quite unknown what's going on behind the scenes, so there's not that kind of cooperation going on. So yes, there's pluses and minuses, if that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
Great.
Kia ora, Councillor McDonald.
I guess you kind of answered my question and what you said at the end, because my question was based around the relevance of this process to Te Maru. And my question was around, if we take hypothetically the situation we have now, the first presentation we just had with Taheke, and we were against that, how does that feature in our role that's been given in the protection of the Kaituna if it went before the fast track process, where would our authority sit in the scheme of things?
Yes, so if it was referred, there's a process whereby comments are sought on whether it should be referred or not, and that's probably the biggest point of influence that anyone can have over it if invited to comment, because once it's in the fast track process, it's very, very likely it just will be granted. And so if you're opposing it and it does get through to fast track, then the best you can hope for is some influence over conditions, and that's a 20 working day period to comment on draft conditions. There's also a 20 working day period to comment on the proposal itself, but essentially it will be granted. So it's probably influencing it at that referral stage that's really important if you are opposing something.
You've got a question there, Councillor Neves.
Thank you, Ella. I heard you say that there would be a report on treaty impacts for these fast track consents. So I'm presuming that they would look at the treaty landscape and say, well, there was a Tapawika claim and settlement, and there is a co-governance entity, and they have a river document. So that would cement in Maru o Kaituna's invitation to have the opportunity to comment on any consents in the Kaituna area, wouldn't it?
I would expect so. The report that has to be provided, and actually throughout the whole bill, it's really giving recognition to treaty settlements. So so this is good for this group, but if you're not settled, then it's not recognising the treaty in general so much, and so that's where there's a bit of an inequity. Sorry, there's quite a lot of noise feedback.
So just a question about that. You know, we're a very Hapu-centric region, and our treaty settlement is iwi based, but there will be specific developments that are on Hapu land who are mana whenua. So will they be able to, are they likely to be invited to have some sort of input or not?
I think from memory they'd be invited at certain points, but not all. So there's various points where there's an opportunity for some influence, such as nominating someone to be on the panel that sits with iwi authorities, not with Hapu. But I think from memory, Hapu would be invited to comment, and then would be invited to comment on conditions if they had provided comment on the substantive application. But I feel like it's a little while since I looked really closely at that, and it was quite complex with a number of different entities, and you know, it wasn't consistent across all points. Yeah. So I can present to that to the forum next time once we know exactly what it is in law.
Kia ora. Any further questions for Ella?
A definition, if you like. The Maru o Kaituna is an act of decree because it's a settlement. So therefore, under the RMA, they are an affected party. If you haven't got a settlement and you have a gripe, then you are an interested party, which the consent holder could say, oh, the ones who's approving the consent could say, well, damned if we do, damned if we don't. You're only a party of interest. The act of decree or the settlement is the big issue. It's an act of parliament. Whereas if you're an interested party, you've got a gripe, even though you have a relationship to the land and all that. You haven't got an act of decree. So you're not an affected party. There's a difference, isn't it? And Maru Kaituna happens to be an affected party because of its act. Just want.
Ella, I was just reflecting on the settled iwi versus the unsettled iwi, but and just wondering about the status of the Tauranga Moana Advisory Group, which is like a pre-settlement treaty entity, as opposed to this group, which is post-settlement treaty entity. Is there a case to try and get some provision in the bill for that sort of arrangement?
Yeah, our opportunity for any influence over the bill is now over. So we did make submissions on that, and we did seek to widen those opportunities for all parties, in terms of all Māori parties, to try and create more equality there and more opportunities. We also, when it comes to a referral comment, what we have done in the past is advise which parties we think have an interest and should be invited to comment. And so that's where we may include those types of parties and put them forward to the panel will ultimately decide. But we can at least suggest those things at that time. So that is something that we do. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's there's no more questions for you, Ella. So thank you for your presentation and the information you've disseminated today. Kia ora, Ella.
Thank you.
We're going to take a break now for morning tea. We're running.
Charles, be the contact on behalf of Te Maru Kaituna, is that contact?
Kapai? Yep. Happy with it. Charles?
Yep.
Choice. Sure thing. Okay, moving on. 8.3, Kaituna Redivision Annual Report presented by Charles Harley, Coastal Catchments Manager. Kia ora, Charles.
Thank you, and I'll apologise first that this is one of Pim's big projects, and he would have loved to be able to give you this update, but he can't. And Courtney apologises. Courtney Bell that she couldn't make it today. So I'll take you through a short presentation. I'll try and make up a little bit of time just to make sure we finish roughly when we promised to. And if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to go away and try and find the answers for you. The full report was circulated in the pack, so that should be there to help as well. Yeah, so a little bit of the background, and I do feel that I'm preaching to people that know a lot more about this than myself. So please feel free to correct me or to give a bit of guidance if you feel I've gone off track a little bit. So this was just the original concept of the project, and the reporting that I'm giving today is an update on the yearly works or monitoring that has occurred to support the mahi that was done. And why I just left these photos in here is because I know that we've got some new members to the forum, and it gives a little bit of background as to what we're doing. So back in 2014, you can see where the cut occurred, and one of the cuts, as with many river schemes, there's multiple cuts which are made for the creation of farmland. And you can see some of the land, if I can draw your attention to the paddocks which are next to the road down to the spit, that are very browny, wet-looking paddocks. And throughout the project, they've been converted as part of it into salt marsh and estuarine habitat. And the project was really about reinstating the modi of the river and the estuary, and trying to bring back the health to the river and to the estuary. Some of the infrastructure that you can see has been put in as part of the project to support some of the community activities which happen in the area. And that area that was historically paddocks, you can see now is covered with the high tide and is now part of the salt marsh area. There's the boat ramp upgrade and the Coast Guard jetty, which is over the back. Again, just another picture of what you can do, and there's only been 10 years, so it's quite amazing what you can do. And you could see through that original photo how wet the paddocks were, that they were trying to go back to what they originally were. And sometimes it's about understanding what the Earth's trying to do and stop trying to fight against it. So as part of the work, we're continuously monitoring just the influence that we're having by putting the water down there, because it's really, really important that we just continue to monitor the effect of what we're doing. And this is part of it, is just taking the surveys across the estuary, and it changes over time, and that's naturally what does happen. We all know that sand comes and goes and things like that, depending on the year, depending on the flow, depending on the rainfall. And that's just the survey data, so that we can track the progress of the estuary and the moving of the channel, and as it comes across and back and forth. It's just important to keep an eye on that. Water quality was one of the big drivers, and this is a photo showing all of the algal and the algal blooms which were occurring, and we all know that that's quite often a sign of bad water quality and stagnant water, and we're not seeing that anymore. And here's the graphs to show what the testing has shown us, and you can see the reduction, right down 2023, 2024. It's been really good, and it's heading and trending in that really good direction. course, one of the other really important parts is the cultural and recreational aspect of the estuary, and ensuring that what we're doing is only having a positive influence. And so we've got our monitoring project and program which occurs, and a lot of that is ensuring that what we're doing is having a positive effect. And if there is any negative effects that they're identified early, we can work out the why and deal with it. In this one here, when we talk about the salinity of the water, we're talking about how much salt's in there, and we all know that salt has positive and negative effects on things. If you drive down to Whakatane, and if the gates have been open to the Thornton Lagoon, that has a saltwater flushing effect, and a certain amount of the raupo at the front of it dies because it doesn't like the salt water. And so the opposite is that salt water has a cleansing ability as well. So it's getting the balance right. And I think this is all about the balance and making sure that we're getting it right. Along with salinity, also got dissolved oxygen. And oxygen in the water is really important. It's as important as oxygen in the air, because we've seen over in Rotorua and in some of the other areas, is when the dissolved oxygen is really low, everything becomes sluggish and it struggles. It's like climbing Mount Everest. It becomes really hard to do that, because we all need the oxygen. Well, so does the fish and everything in the water. So oxygen is really important. It's one of the indicators of quality. So it's really good to track that, and it's important. Nutrients and bacteria. We've heard before from some of the other people today talking about the impact of nutrients and some of the activities throughout the catchment, right from the very top to the bottom, and the impacts they have. So again, it's really important to keep monitoring the effects. And this information is really important, because it helps drive the work that the land management team do as well. It gives them an indication of where things are at and where to focus their activities. So yeah, it's really important, and we need to just obviously keep using it. One thing I would say with this information is it needs to be long-term to be able to get a trend. So if you looked at 1 year and 1 year alone, it doesn't really give you the full picture. You need to look at the picture over time. Something which is as close to all of our hearts is the ability to go and get a feed from the estuary, and that's really important. So checking that our seafood is safe to eat is right up there. So the monitoring occurs through the year, and for those that I'm not sure if Pim's explained it before, but someone wanders out into the estuary and goes and gathers normally a container full of pipi or whatever other shellfish is there. They take it back to the lab, and we process a lot of it internally ourselves. So we've got that ability to grow the bacteria and read the results and see what's in your seafood. And that's really important, because we all know that you can get quite crook if it's not good, and if it's not good, we need to work out why it's not good. And with our pipi, we want to make sure that there's plenty there, and the results last year has shown improvements as over the last few years. So that's not only, as I say, the size, but the density, which is important as well. Yeah, and the toxins start to build up when you don't have that good water coming through, and they more or less shut up shop and close down, and the toxins build up inside them. So they need to be able to regulate and keep their mouths open and keep feeding. And when they can't do that because water quality is not there, we get the issues. So that bit of salt water just helps with that cleansing.
I know this is on Maki too, but is it the same issue in Waihi Beach? Is it in Little Waihi? Is there an improvement there as well in the?
Yeah, I'm not too sure, but I will endeavour to get back to you with that information. Yeah, because we do. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so
I just into your area.
Yeah, we do. So we have the Waitahi pipi beds, which is extremely popular in the summer months because it's accessible. It's right next to the road there, and a lot of people, and especially Upukurihi, have said that they're the sweetest pipi you can ever find. The distribution there quite often can be tracking towards smaller pipi. And sometimes I think that's probably due to I used to think that it was due to the amount of people gathering, because my work historically with MPI was around shellfish collecting and bits and pieces like that. But it was actually one of the scientists that said to me, when you have too many pipi in an area, they do actually compete. And that can reduce the growth as the amount of pipi all competing for the same food source. Which in Waitahi estuary, the area down closer to the mouth, and I'm not too sure why there's a difference. The smaller pipi, but the further you go up, and if you dig into the mud a little bit more, they're more orange shelled, and you get a lot bigger pipi. And I'm not too sure if they've just had that opportunity to grow a bit bigger or slightly different. But yeah, I can definitely get back to you because we have that information across the region for our shellfish. As part of the Waitahi project that I'm involved in, we're working quite closely with Upukurihi, Whakatohia, and the Ministry of Health, ensuring that the right notifications and information is out there for people.
Those types of stats are really handy for us to make a comparison. Looking at other harbours, this harbour as well.
Yeah.
And look at the growth of pippies. I think that would be welcome.
Yeah, Mike.
Gotcha. That would be welcome, that information, if you could share that.
Definitely, and we've just started with our summer monitoring campaign where we have our summer students or summer experience opportunities. So I know that some of the jobs out there, some lucky people get to go out and they get to do the monitoring and go out there and then bring all that information back to the lab. So they should be finished by the time we have our next hui. So I'll look to see if I can work with Stephen Park to bring that information back to you, because that would be the most up-to-date information, which will include Makatu and Little Waihi.
Can I say that you actually need to do a literature review on the historical account? Because I remember after the war, where the place was thick, and the mullet used to go right up, in terms of Little Waihi, the mullet used to go right up the Pairere and Kaikokubu rivers. They don't now. They used to go up there because they used to follow the salt water, and then when the tide goes out. And the other thing was, right up to the 1950s, 60s, just getting into the 60s, you were actually walking on pipis down Makatu. Now, you've got to go through 2 feet of sedimentation. Sedimentation is the killing of the both Little Waihi and what's called. Where does that come from? Well, they always talk about Makatu being a Patakakai area, and it was. Economically, that was a rich place because you had kerudu, you had ducks, you had fish, you had whitebait, and they all were sought after in time with the moon, the stars, and the tides. Those patterns don't work now because you've got the development that's happening in the Papua East, and you got the buildup of sedimentation and the flushing out. And if you've been away for 30 years, like I went away shearing for over 30 years, and I came back, and the first thing I noticed that you could see Motiti Island from where the marae is. Well, I went to a tangi, and I said, hell, you can see Motiti Island. One time you couldn't, because the sand used to bank up on the sand dunes. It used to be high, and you couldn't see Motiti Island. And because of the flushing and the build-up of the sedimentation in the the whole pattern had changed. Even the fish life. The fish life has changed. You don't see whitebait going up, and you don't see eels, because those things, we get our timeline from the birds and the beasts, if you like, because they know the environment better than we do. And so we rely on one another to survive on. They survive on all the other fish, and we survive on them. And so that's the evolutionary thing.
Definitely, and that aligns with what I've been told by when Charlie Aramoana was alive in Kitiriri. He told me the same around Hiwa Harbour. You could definitely see a noticeable change with the development of the land, and he talked about the days where there was 8 mangrove which were named, and now there's 8 million which are there. So yeah, there definitely is that progression and change through sedimentation, which has changed it. But we can go back, as we've got information for quite a few years, and I'll definitely bring that along.
Can I just ask that you include the pipi out of Papamoa, Mount Maunganui? Because I mean, now they look like this. I mean, when I was a kid gathering, they look like this. So now they look like this, and I'm saying to people, you shouldn't even be taking them.
I'll have a look. When I talk to Stephen, I'll find out where we've got information for and bring that along. I know that MPI also do some sites. They do their own monitoring, but it is only a handful of sites. So I'll work with Stephen to get that information and bring something forward. And Pim had this slide in, and this year we did have a moment there where we thought there could have been some overtopping a few months ago, and it didn't happen, but it was definitely something which was on the radar and caused some concern. So it is a risk, and it's a risk that we've got in quite a few of the estuaries where the river mouths can move, and the channel can move. And as you can see here, where you've got the channel which is naturally hooking in towards the bank, and then it weakens it, so there's a chance that it could be overtopped. It's one of the dynamic natures. At the moment, the Tarawera River is heading a long way towards the east, and it never it probably did historically, but it's causing a little bit of a concern. And then I jumped in and had a look, and in 1 year it changed direction 3 or 4 times down at the mouth. So it is one of those things which is related to the weather and the activities and the rainfall, and it's something we're keeping an eye on, because obviously, we're trying to avoid it by push-ups where we can, but it is something which is sometimes out of our control, and can just happen. And this was one which was discussed, was around the ability to control the gates which are down in the bottom, to, when there's a large rainfall event, to send water instead of into the estuary, to put water back down through the river down over the bar. And there's been there's been quite a lot of work and quite a lot of discussion around this. And the reason behind it was reducing the amount of sediment load into the estuary by kind of almost flushing it back out to sea through the mouth. And it was it was a debate over balancing up all of the factors with the flooding risks and things like that involved. So they suggested, and they've come up with a trigger which is around that 70 cubic. So when the river is gauged further up automatically and it starts to reach the trigger level, then the gates will automatically down the bottom adjust. And that will mean that we're not filling up the estuary with silt and mud and adding more issues on top of what's there. It will instead be flushed out through the main mouth. So that's been all automated, and while it's got on Pim's slide there, thoughts around there, it has been brought before and discussed with the community as well. And there was 2 levels you can see there which have been highlighted, and the compromise was kind of the middle. And
this is quite a good idea where you're integrating modern science with customary rights, but I think you need to take more note of the customary practices, because that relationship between birds, the trees, and the fish, they've been integrated over centuries and centuries. That goes right back to Hawaii, and all that knowledge needs to come in, and to add modern science to it is a good thing. But modern science has to know those customary relationships between the birds, the fish, and the environment.
And that was my last slide. So there is as I say, the full report is there. And if you do have questions, I'm more than happy to have a crack, or if not, I'll have to get back to you on an answer.
Charles, in terms of the sedimentation in the Kaituna, closing the gates, does that have any effect upstream, or it's just the downstream benefit?
It's just the downstream. So it's the gates to stop the water going into the estuary, and instead it just shoots back straight out that short distance through the mouth out to sea. So it's not hindering the flow or backing the flow up. It's just kind of more diverting it and stopping it from going into the estuary as much. And it's only for a short amount of time when that flood trigger level is tripped. And it's really just, it does help with the flushing of the river mouth as well, to keep that navigable, and also to reduce the sediment load going in.
Just in terms of the increased nutrient levels sort of spiking like 23, 24, is that sort of still fallout from Cyclone Gabriel?
That's rainfall related, and through the monitoring which I've been involved in throughout other parts of the region, whenever we get large rainfall events and wet years, we get higher nutrient loads just because of the flushing effect. So you've got your phosphorus and then your sediment, which travel together attached, and they're just, when we had 3 meters of rain where we normally have 1.8 meters, so we just get more flushing, more washing off of the land, and unfortunately more erosion. And flushing through of the land too, so nutrients that can travel down are being flushed through the system. Yeah,
I know after Gabriel and anniversary weekend, there was like a massive buildup of sediment in the Waiari and the Kaituna, and it's been a concern for a number of years, I think, with the rising bed level beside the stop bank. Down the Te Puke floodable area, the heightened river level has meant that those drains can't exit into the river as well as they used to when the river was a bit lower. But have you got any comment on that, or the benefit of maybe dredging to try and reduce the sediment to get the level down a bit? Is there any sort of
I know that, and I can't comment on the work that the rivers and drainage team are doing around there, but our team looks more preventative towards looking at land use further up the catchments and seeing if that's suitable. We've got some new tools identifying the risk around different types of erosion based on the class of land and where it is. So we're looking more at that when we're working with landowners to try and give them guidance on what's the best land use. But as far as the draining or dredging goes, I'm not aware of any of that happening recently. It's more so looking for that, I suppose, natural flushing.
Yes, Pim has sort of indicated that there's no budget for dredging, but I actually put a personal submission into the regional council about upstream erosion and any efforts that regional can do to minimise or mitigate the erosion in relation to, I guess, things like wildling pines and dead trees and logs falling into the river. I attended a presentation in Karikari a couple of years ago, and the guy that used to work for regional council, Laurie, someone or other,
Donald,
he talked about the scale or the effect of nutrient or sedimentation, even from a very small site of erosion, can have significant effects in the river. So it's good to hear that you've got some plans in place to try and combat that. But I know some of the upper Haui and Ohini Anga Anga are very inaccessible and steep banks. But is there anything you can do about like the vegetation density on those banks and potential for washing away in major events?
Well, it's kind of, if vegetation is your friend and it can be your enemy at times. So vegetation intercepts the rainfall which is coming through, and it also has the ability through its roots to hold the bank together. But when you get areas which have been undercut and there's areas of erosion, they can fall in and topple in, and then it can become a problem. But one thing with erosion is that it is a naturally occurring process, and I live not far from the Uruwetas, and they erode, and it does occur throughout. Obviously, it's accelerated in areas where there's been more influence on it. With log removal and trees and damage, where we know it's occurring, we definitely look to work with the landowners to remove it, because as you said, it can cause quite a lot of damage, and the river getting in behind a tree which has fallen over and scouring it out is a problem. And we would rather know about it and be proactively involved in the removal of it. And we've got consents which allow us to do that, and rules that allow to do that. So where we do know that it's occurring, we definitely get in there and do it. Where we've got the scheme, which is obviously people in that scheme are paying into it, we've got the team which work consistently in that area, trying to identify areas of risk in advance and look to manage it. With the rivers that we've got down east, and I'm sorry I keep using eastern examples, but we do a lot of gravel management, and gravel management is controlling the bed height because of the type of river that they are. So we use gravel management as a tool. I'm not 100% sure with the rivers down here in this area, because I'm not as connected to them yet, but I think a lot of them don't have that gravel issue and things like that, and it's more they're coming through drained wetland, swamp, kind of marshy historic areas which are a bit softer and more easily erodible.
Good, thanks for that.
Councillor Nays, you have a question?
Yes, well, firstly, thanks to Charles. I know there's a lot to get up to speed with in the Western Bay, but thank you very much for that report. I was just reflecting as you were talking on the dynamic nature of our coastal environment and how climatic conditions have a major influence on what we observe in the estuary. And also the Kaituna action plan was very much based on looking back at the way the river used to be and looking forward on what we could do to help bring it back to a good state of health. But I was thinking about potential of climate change and what work we've done to predict what the Kaituna estuary will be facing maybe in the next 30 years by way of changes coming through from increased sea level or increased extreme weather events, etc. So has there been any work done specifically on the Kaituna River and the estuary on what we may be expecting, what we may have to consider planning for in the future? And if not, could we consider doing something about that and reporting back to this forum?
Thank you, Councillor Nees. Through the chair, when Pim first talked about the project, I did ask him the same question, and he did say that he had an answer and did provide it. So I will dig down into the files and I'll talk to Pim and Courtney and find that information and bring it back, because that is a really important question when we're working in that low-lying coastal area. What is the implications? So I will find that for you. I'll take that as an action and get back to you at the next forum, if that's okay.
Sorry, through the chair. Do I remember correctly, a couple of years ago, a group came in and said we were part of a study in the Kaituna. They were looking at the coastal erosion and climate change, and they were going to report back. There was like 4 places around New Zealand, and oh, there we go. Something clicked in their brain.
You're dead right, Nick. We did have a presentation where there was, I think they were NIWA doing bits and pieces, and they were asking for Te Maru's nod, and that was given forthright because the work they were doing was contributing. And Councillor Nees is talking about the work. There's definitely a lot of work in that space that's been driving our draft regional planning for freshwater plan change. So some of those options about so we're working on the draft freshwater changes, and the big things that we have to look at in that are the nutrients, sediment. Those are the biggies for the Kaituna. So definitely working on those options about what we do about it and which bits are natural versus which ones are human induced are all part of those options. And our councillors, as you will have got an email back a few weeks, our council has pushed pause on releasing our draft because the government's making some changes, but that's all in that mix of options about how we address that, what we can address in the timeframes. Yeah. Climate change is definitely factored into those options because, as Councillor Nees is pointing out, some of those things are coming at us fast, and we've got to keep those in the mix for writing a plan for the next 10, 20, 30 years out, and being very cognizant of what's within our powers to make a difference and what's already in train, as it were.
Kia ora, thank you, Joe. Any other questions?
In terms of global warming, we should be immersed in it now rather than waiting. Otherwise, it's like waiting for the ambulance to arrive, and you'll end up over the cliff with the ambulance. But global warming is blatantly obvious. It's a global issue, and if we look at the 4-point plan, 4-point conditions I was talking about, economic, it could be also an advantage to our economy. If we dealt with global warming now, it shouldn't be looked at as some rough debt. We should be advancing our relationship with global warming, economically, socially, culturally, and the rest of it. because when the last river has flooded and the last tree has been been destroyed and the last birds are left, there's one thing you'll know, that global warming has been around for quite some time. Don't wait for it.
Kia ora, Charles. I've got a question. As mentioned in your presentation, there was something close to a breach of the sand dunes. I think it'll be fair to expect that in the short term that's probably going to happen. And if so, can that be restored? Have we got a plan in place for when that takes place?
So the short answer is that I'll have to go and find out. But I know that there was a push-up which they did not that long ago in that area. The one thing though is that with sand being really quite dynamic and its ability to move, any changes that you make quite often are only very, very short term, and sand will build up or accrete as it happens. But I'll go back and I'll have a chat with Pim and Courtney around the previous work and the why and what their thoughts are, and get something back to you if that's all right.
Thank you, Charles.
So through the chair on that point there, because in here on page 109 is the resource consent, and it's under urgency of proposed work. So is that something that I'm only bringing it up because it's been highlighted?
One of the things with emergency push-ups with sand is that you have to have the sand available. If the sand's not available because of erosion and things like that, you're stuck. And when we had those really extreme La Nina weather patterns, which we had all of the easterlies and those massive swells and things like that, and there was risks to people's properties further along the coast there, people were talking about that, but there was no sand to push up because it was gone. And so that's just something to keep in the back of the mind, that when we're looking at options, we have to have a look at what's there and how things are. And I don't want to sound like I'm negative on it, but I just want to make sure that we're realistic on it. But it definitely is an option. And I think looking at through the Coast Care program at those coastal areas, and if we can slow down what's happening there through planting or pest management and things like that, there's opportunities there just to add that little bit of mitigation as well to what's happening. And we can identify those risk areas and see what we can do.
Okay, thank you, Charles, for your presentation. Oh, sorry, one more.
Sorry, Joel. I just had a thought. I made a note earlier, but I couldn't remember the exact term. But Charles, I'm just wondering about your understanding of Pacific decadal oscillation and the fact that you talked about, I think we're in the final year of La Nina, the current cycle, and perhaps heading into a 20-year period of El Nino. Is that correct, or is it the other way around? And how that affects the coastline and maybe the potential effect on the Makatu estuary?
I'm not an absolute gun on it, but we were talking about is the southern oscillation, where you get either El Nino or La Nina years. And we went through some quite strong, and when you get a La Nina or an El Nino, the effect can be weak through to extremely strong. And we went through some really strong La Nina events. And with La Nina events for us, we get, I'm talking about the Bay of Plenty, we get lots of easterlies, northeasterlies that bring large swells and lots of rainfall. And when we switch and we go into an El Nino pattern, we get a lot of angry farmers because we get westerlies every day by about 10 o'clock. It's really dry, and we head more into the kind of the drought phase of things. they were supposedly going into a light La Nina for this summer. It can really vary. And one of the things which I did find interesting was that it affects the different parts of the countries, like the floods that you're seeing at the moment down the west coast. We can get droughts, they can get floods. It really does. It does vary. Talking about 20-year patterns, I'm not 100% sure on that, but I do know that it does fluctuate, and it fluctuates in the strength of the different weather event, and it has all sorts of different impacts, because I love fishing, and it has an impact on the water currents and the water temperatures and things like that. So it does have those impacts on the environment.
I mean, I had quite a lengthy conversation with Jim Darm, who manages the dune push-ups at Pukahina, and you know, you get that. There was a good program on TV a few years ago about Port Waikato and the moving moles of sand, I think, as they move down the coastline, and just in relation to the potential breach of the dune at Makatu. If that's a consideration.
It could well be. I mean, if you use, and depending on the size of the weather event and what the build-up is, and with that you've got the estuary on the other side, which has an impact because of where the channel is. I know, and I think without Dean may have known the history that back at Hiwa Harbour there used to be a tavern and a whole lot of houses which were out on the peninsula on the eastern side of Hiwa Harbour, and they're gone now, no longer there. And they tried to bury car bodies to try and hold the sand up, and they're also gone. So yeah, the coastal effect is really interesting. I find it interesting, and Jim Darn, if you do get the opportunity, anyone else, he puts it so in such an easy to understand way, and he's an absolute guru in what I'd call that geomorphology, understanding the sand, the interaction with the land, the weather, the sea. He's just he lives and breathes it. Yeah, so I would tend to believe that if he said it, it's going to happen.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you. All right, thank you again, Charles. All right, moving on. 9.1, amendments to standing orders, virtual attendance at meetings. We have a presentation from Steve Groom, Governance Manager. Kia ora, Steve.
Kia ora tātou, ko Steve Groom, tōku ingoa. I'm Governance Manager here at Toi Moana. So since 2021, various viral and weather events have meant that the Local Government Act was temporarily amended to enable attendees attending meetings online to count towards quorum. That legislation has lapsed, which puts you in a position where you need to decide whether you'd like to amend your standing orders to enable virtual attendance, or not amend your standing orders, in which case you won't get quorum if everyone's not in the room. There's kind of two key considerations for you. The first is what I've just outlined there, and that is recommendation 2A through D will give effect to enabling online attendance to count towards quorum. The second consideration that you need to have a think about is whether you'd like your meetings to be able to be chaired by a chair who is online, or whether you would like the chair to be in the room. Basically recommendation 2E is essentially an enabling recommendation that would enable a chair to chair virtually. Recommendation 2G is the option that would mean that the chair is required to be in the room. That doesn't necessarily prevent the chair from vacating the chair and handing over to somebody who is in the room to chair the meeting. So happy to answer questions or comments.
Any questions?
We'll just need to clarify which of E or G you're moving. Yeah.
For enabling, because it does give that option for the chair.
Yes, that's regarding the chairing. Yeah.
I think allowing that is sensible, should circumstances require that, but I think in practice, the chair would be either present himself or that online would hand down to the deputy.
Yeah, I guess I'm sort of adverse to that suggestion. I actually prefer the latter, and that is to have the chair present in the committee room. So, yeah, I'm not in favour of the chair being virtual, because if the main chair cannot be present, you've always got the option of the deputy chair. So my view is the chair, in my view, should be present.
Chair can't make it, but then would like to participate. But, you know, handing it to the deputy who is present, just considering that factor.
That's okay if the chair vacates and hands to the deputy. The chair will no longer be the chair, but can still attend the meeting.
Or regardless of that second additional.
Yeah, in either of those scenarios, that could occur. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a recommendation for numbers 1 and 2A to D. These are reasonably straightforward. So I'd like to call for a mover and a seconder for the recommendations 1 and 2A to E first. We'll deal with E and F separately. Mover? Okay, got Nakara to move, second.
Excellent, that's the easy bit.
Can I have a seconder, please? Got it, thank you. And
perhaps I don't know if this assists, but I'll say it anyhow. 2E in enabling a chair to chair the meeting virtually doesn't preclude you from having a practice as a committee of prioritising in-person chairing. So you could do that to kind of future-proof for scenarios, you know, the very odd scenario where the chair has to chair virtually, but have a practice as a committee that you'll prioritise the chair being in the room, and if the chair's attending virtually, the chair will have a practice of vacating to somebody who is in the room. So if you voted E, that would enable that. It would technically enable a chair to chair virtually in the odd event where that was beneficial to you as a committee. But you could also have a kind of agreed informal practice that you would prioritise the chair being in the room. So,
Sorry. Yeah, where does the deputy chair sit in that scenario?
So if the chair vacates, then the deputy chair would tend to be the chair.
Mm-hmm.
If the chair vacates, yeah.
I think just for clarity, if I can't be here on the day, I think we'd want a human sitting in this chair to chair the meeting.
Yeah, it's very difficult to chair virtually.
Copy. So I can't foresee that happening in the near future, but if that turns out to be the case, I would then hand it over to Mate Moana to chair the meeting on the day. I could then still be a part of the meeting virtually, but wouldn't be chairing the meeting.
Yeah.
Correct?
So I guess it's whether you want to compel the committee to do that or whether you want to do that by practice. And yeah, and I guess the advantage of doing it by practice, what I mean by that is you set up the rules so that a chair could chair virtually, but by practice you don't let that happen. But I guess it protects against a very rare scenario where your chair's not here, your deputy chair's not here, no one in the room feels comfortable chairing, you could still run your meeting.
Right, so there's still some flexibility there.
Yeah.
And considering what's happened in the last few years, this might be something to benefit this forum. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think we've been in a situation though where we've had the chair actually missing. Well, our situation has been getting quorum because we haven't had representatives.
yeah.
Missing. And I think the reason why I vote to have the chair present is that I think it's a better, shouldn't we use the word control, but to be able, a better, smoother running of the committee if the chair is present. The other reason why I raise that, I think, is that when we have manuhiri to this committee, it is the responsibility of the chair as our head to be acknowledging the presence of those manuhiri that come here. And it's the kanohi ki te kanohi thing that we should be acknowledging in this committee forum, and hence the reason why I vote for G, and the reason why the chair should be present. It's not just about the running of this; it's acknowledging the manuhiri that we have sitting at that table, and they should be acknowledged by the chair and present, not up there.
Kia ora.
I just said if you got a chairman that's online, it's too easy to skim, Skype and scram, switch off, bang, rather than in the room. You can have a pie thrown at you and you feel it.
Okay, just a reminder, we need 75% approval of members present who are able to vote for the proposed amendments to standing orders. Okay, so we've got two options in front of us, option E and option F, and I'm going to ask for a vote, I suppose, if you're in support of the recommendation for 2E. Could you raise your hand, please? That must mean we're in support of option 2F. Oh, sorry.
Yes, apologies, I've confused you with the lettering there.
Yeah, thanks. All right,
So two F it is, so chair must be in the room.
Correct.
Done. 2G, sorry, I've tripped myself up.
So can I have a mover and a seconder, please, for option 2F? G. It's different on my piece of paper. 2G. Yeah, sorry, mine says F, but we're talking G. Your vote? All right.
So you had a mover?
Mover and a seconder, please. So moving, Councillor McDonald. Second, thank you, Nick. All those in favour say aye. Carried. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, we got the. Okay, moving on, 9.2, Tapuiki Youth Authority Update Report. The presenter, Raponi Terangika Tukua Wilson, has given his apologies. I'd like to call for a mover and a seconder to receive the report. Take it as read. The report's been read. Mover and a seconder, please, to receive the report. Thank you, Nick. Moved by Nakara. Second. Kia ora, thanks. Thank you, Councillor Daly. All those in favour say aye. Aye, carried. Verbal updates. Are there any verbal updates anyone wants to provide?
Just on behalf of Western Bay Planning District Council, I don't have a extensive update, but Jason Crummer, our staff member in attendance via Zoom, has provided me a brief update to read out, but he's also provided a picture that we've put up on the screen here. So this is the Bell Road boat ramp area. Western Bay Council recently purchased this area of land outlined in yellow from Waka Kotahi, which they purchased for the purpose of constructing the TEL, I believe, but it was surplus to requirements once the TEL was completed. And they offered it to our council at a favourable price. And our staff, Jason in particular, who's the reserve management staff member in charge of reviewing and developing our reserve management plans, will work up a concept plan for this piece of land in conjunction with tangata whenua and the community, and just signalling that this is in train, and however no formal discussions have taken place with any iwi or hapu at this stage, as I understand. So just a heads up that that's a possibility that the Te Maru might want to consider some input into. Well, I'm sure Jason at some stage will come and do a presentation here as well.
Questions? Comment? Kapai, kia ora.
Just want to update the group on at the last meeting we had a presentation from a group Ngio Kaituna, and they were making a waka. They were proposing to make a waka. They completed that project, and that was launched on the 30th of August down at the boat ramp at Maketu. And that was to celebrate the launching of a traditional waka on the awa. Hasn't happened for 100 years, so that was the first in 100 years that we'd put together. And the name of that waka was Te Taui Huoterangi, in remembrance of the Te Aroa waka that landed at Maketu. And that program is now moved on to building another 2 waka. And so that's with some of our young men, getting them involved in the waka building, but also we take them out on the river and teach them around river safety, swimming, all those sorts of things as well as the tika and the history of the area that they work in. So we're at stage 2 now, or the project's at stage 2, and I'm just bringing it up because in our budget we allocated about $5,000 towards our project. So at some point I'm assuming they're going to come and ask. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you, Dean. Any other updates?
That in Te Upu, that's the Papamore Hills, we may want to be included in that, in the particularly recreational and those sort of things. The current situation is that the amount of visitors that go up to Papamore Hills now is well over 100,000 a year. I think it's about 200,000 a year, the stats. And there are certain areas of recreational that's lodged in a number of treaty claims, the Waitaha claim, Ngā Pūtiki and all of them are linked into it. And it's that whole concept, that whole idea of mountains to the sea, because in the historical accounts it goes from Ōtane Wainuku down to the Wairake. There's a number of court cases, arguments against Falkland Hogan and all those sort of things are all linked into it. And the protection of Ōtaua and Department of Conservation. So the general thinking is to have everybody collaborate so that when it comes to paying the bills, you have a number of organisations paying the bills, Department of Conservation and all of them would be contributing. National policy statement could be included in it to resource that mountains to the sea. It also has important to the regional economy, sets a precedent for the economic development of the region. So that's what I'm just saying would be parties of interest at this early stage, and watch this space.
Any other updates?
Yeah, it's not an update because I haven't been asked to convey any updates, but just thinking of the sort of opportunity for the membership or partners to engage. Potentially could have worked the other way, where, say, if this committee wants to convey something to one of the partners, or if you think that sort of context or concept, where potentially, I don't know, there was a slide up there before which showed through the Kaituna cut, and on this side of the cut, there's that Ford development proposed there. And I know when the council got first elected a couple of months back, we did a site visit onto that Ford land that, the Ford family is wanting to develop that. And I saw the image there of the head before it got through to the cut. And I remember a few years back that I was very keen on retaining that as green space on this end of the cut, because that's precious, sensitive land. And I'm not sure what happened in terms of the final structure, what do you call it, the structure plan. But I think stuff like that, if this committee should suggest that in the structure planning or whatever, we retain a fair amount of that in terms of open public green space, or for whatever reason, this committee could, perhaps broaden the scope of this standing item on the agenda to include something like that. If this committee sees something and wants to then communicate with the council, we should therefore, perhaps pass a resolution that the communication is made from this committee to whoever partner or entity that we'd like to achieve something for the benefit of the, perhaps, just give some feedback, because I didn't have anything to present in terms of an update. But yeah, make it more proactive or works both
through
ways.
the chair, in regards to that piece out there, Te Tumu, if that's what we're talking about, the Te Tumu, yeah. So we've asked Tauranga City Council to give us updates as it progresses. We know that kind of area is on a hold at the moment. So, what we've been told is once there's something to report from the City Council, Tauranga City Council, they'll come here and do a presentation of that.
Any changes or updates, it immediately comes here.
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you. But yeah, just even outside that, thinking about that concept that it's works both ways. Yeah, just an idea. Because I'm likely not to be here because I'm only the alternate. Normally, Steve Morris would be here, but it's just pitching my 5 cents worth.
Councillor Tully.
Since I'm here as an alternate as well, I probably take this opportunity to update on a project I'm involved in through a community group, which is the Lawrence Oliver Park Wetland Project in Te Puke. Myself and Jackson Efford, who works for Regional Council as a water engineer, came and presented to this group about 18 months ago now, and proposed this idea. We got support from Te Maru, a commitment of $5,000 in the budget towards the project. We've done a whole heap of work since then. A fully engineered plan has been created. Did a group Te Ara Ka Hikati Pathway Society application to TECT for funding. We were successful with $30,000 towards that, which we just notified about a month ago. So Jackson, we've been working with Western Bay as well. Jackson has a lot of delegated authority from regional council, but we've got Western Bay also on board now in terms of a full commitment in terms of 3-year management plan and further funding commitments for the construction and also the ongoing maintenance. A joint commitment from both regional council and Western Bay for the next 3 years, and we hope to start building that constructed wetland over this coming summer. And there's one little stumbling block, and that is Kiwi Rail agreement in writing, just so that we don't fall foul of them. But other than that, all the other agreements are in place. So. Okay.
Thank you. Any other updates?
There's an opportunity for trusts like TECT and all those to be included in, because if you're an interested party or an affected party, you should be part and parcel of the scoping of future planning. And if you're that, then you bring your checkbook along with you, basically. So you've got all parties paying to the contribution. That's even multimillionaires who's got benefits at the end of the tunnel. Yeah. And they don't pay, they don't give over to the development. Because if you go back to the history of tourism in Rotorua, it started through a disaster in Tarawera and penny diving. Yeah. And then you had the Mount Cook Airlines came into play, and they integrated the geothermal in Rotorua and the snows in Mount Cook Airlines. That became a very wealthy organization that contributed to a lot of the payments, like TECT and play outlets like that. And if you go down Southland, all the public trust, they pay for many of them, all the green spaces, recreation reserves, and all that sort of thing. The Southland Think Trust, they own all the hotels in Southland. Yeah. Because that mayor makes a lot of gravy out of that whole Tim Shadbolt. But anyway, that's another story. But what I'm saying is there needs to be collaboration. Yeah. Collaboration rather than just depending on the ratepayers. You know, there are other ways to skin a cat.
Tēnā nō rā tātai. E tuake nei e mihi atu kia koutou, kia koe Maru mō nā kauhau I tēnei rā. Ia te wā, ko whakawhariki hia o mōhiotanga mā tauranga mō te tirohanga Māori ki te ao, mihi ana ki tēnā ākuta. Utira nā whia ko whaioro ki tēnei taho te whare, o ku koeke, e arahi nei I tēnei pia mea ki, tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou katoa. Tēnei tā, koutou nā kai kouni hira, nei anō nā mihi atu kia koutou ko tai mai ki te ata wetu I nā kōrero I tēnei rā. Ko tāko e ki tēnei, ko tutu ki pai ai nā mahi I tēnei hui, no reira e mihi ana ki tēnā tātai. E whakakopane I huni nā kōrero I tēnei wā kia karakia tātai. Unuhia atu ki te uru tapunui kia māmā kia wātea te nākau te tinana te hininaro I te ara takatū. Ko ia rā e rongo whakeirihi aki ki runga, haumi e, hui e, tā e ki e. Kia ora tātai.